Hey, deserving listeners, a lot of you have been asking me to react to the video in which Oprah interviews Harry and Meghan. So let's watch. My name is Dr. Kirk Honda. I'm a therapist and a professor. Let's see what happens.
It was reported that Meghan had left Kate in tears over the bride-to-be's strict demands over flower girl dresses.
The narrative with Kate, which didn't happen, was really, really difficult and something that I think that's when everything changed, really.
You say the narrative with Kate, it didn't happen.
Okay, so I don't know much about the tabloids around this issue, but let's just imagine a world in which the accusations against Meghan were false and the psychological toll that could take on someone, or at the very least, the story was blown out of proportion or something. And it's tempting as a non-famous person, myself and other non-famous people, observing famous people, and thinking, well, you know, they're famous, they've got it all that negativity in the press, it'll be fine. And what I know is that they're human beings. For me, the very few people that know about me on the internet and on YouTube, when I get a negative comment, I mean, it goes straight to my soul. And I'm not unusual. I talk with a lot of other podcasters, a lot of other people who create content, and they all have the same feeling. Everyone has a different way of dealing with it. We're human beings, and I cannot imagine the amount of press and negativity, even if it's 1%. And that's one of the things that I like to tell people is, like, imagine if 1%, or even lower than that, say 0.1%, 1 out of 1,000 people absolutely hates your guts and will spend 15 minutes a day trying to ruin your life. Well, if you have 1,000 fans, or if you have 10,000 fans, and that's one person. But if you have millions upon millions of fans, then you probably have thousands and thousands of people in a very small group, a very small minority of people. But that amount of people who are trying to ruin your life, and maybe even get money from ruining your life through the tabloids, selling tabloids, then even if you try to protect yourself, it's going to get under your skin. It's going to hurt. I did videos about Britney Spears and about Paris Hilton, and it was a similar realization of how much negativity they get. And we have to add to the equation the sexism of our various societies, that for women in the spotlight, they tend to be treated much, much worse. Now, I don't know about Meghan, but it sounds like right from the start, she's talking about that. So let's continue watching.
I don't think it's fair to her to get into the details of that because she apologized.
Okay.
And I've forgiven her, right? Mm-hmm. What was hard to get over was being blamed for something that not only I didn't do, but that happened to me.
Okay, so according to Meghan, what happened was the opposite. That during the wedding, the sister-in-law said something that was hurtful. Meghan cried. Later, Kate apologized. No big deal. Sounds like water under the bridge. Things happen during stressful times, and it sounds like they worked it out. We should all just trust her, unless Kate has a different side of the story. We certainly shouldn't believe the tabloids. From Meghan's side, it sounds like a thing that happens between people sometimes. I mean, for those who know my podcast, me and Alberto, we get in fights sometimes and make each other cry, and then we apologize and we move on. But no one cares about it, and no one writes about it in tabloids or blames one of us because no one cares. It happens in families, it happens in relationships. It sounds like they worked it out. Maybe if we were there, we might say one of them or both of them were being unreasonable or something. But, you know, people make mistakes sometimes. It's fine.
You knew all along, and people around you knew that that wasn't true.
Everyone in the institution knew it wasn't true.
So why didn't somebody just say that?
It's a good question. I'm not sharing that piece about Kate in any way to be disparaging to her. I think it's really important for people to understand.
Okay, what I think is implied there is that when it came time to maybe release a statement to the public and saying, no, Meghan didn't make Kate cry, Kate made Meghan cry, and the institution of the royal family decided, it's probably best that we don't say anything. Why would they do that? well, on one hand, maybe they just don't get involved in all the tabloid accusations. Maybe it's just their policy of like, unless it's an emergency, the tabloids say all sorts of weird stuff and you just have to live with it. We can't be constantly engaging with that and giving it any kind of justification. The other possibility is that the royal family institution, as she called it, was more concerned about Kate's public persona because she is going to be potentially the next queen, or I don't know the exact nomenclature, but the wife of the king eventually one day. And so maybe they're more concerned with Kate's persona and her image and less concerned with Meghan's. I don't know if that's what Meghan was saying, but maybe Oprah will ask.
Yeah.
Negate it, they wouldn't let her because she's a good person. And I think so much of what I have seen play out is this idea of polarity, where if you love me, you don't have to hate her. And if you love her, you don't need to hate me.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so she's bringing up another phenomenon that I can speak to in our society, which is that we will see women in power as inherently at odds with each other. We might see men in power and either we see them as being neutral towards each other, or we might even see them being friends or buddies or something. But when we see women in power, multiple women in power, we just assume, because of sexism, prejudice, and stereotyping, that they must be catfighting, this kind of thing. And why do we do that? Well, there's probably a lot of reasons why people will assume that, and I wonder if that's what was happening for her. She's commenting to that. She's like, everyone was assuming that me and Kate were fighting. Also, people seem to be, they either have to be Team Meghan or they have to be Team Kate. Why can't they just be Team both of us? That's what she's speaking to right now.
There was a whole online a piece about this. Kate eating avocados to help with morning sickness.
Oh, I heard about the avocado one.
But you were eating avocados.
And fueling murder, apparently.
Wolfing down a fruit linked to water shortages, illegal deforestation.
All right, I actually remember these comparisons. The same behavior in Kate and in Meghan, different tabloids. For Kate, it is avocados is this wonderful thing, but when Meghan eats avocados, it's this terrible, terrible act against the earth or something. So I don't know. As a scientist, researcher myself occasionally, I have to wonder if they were cherry picking this. When we look at phenomena like this, we have to gather many different stories of both individuals and see if there were, because there could have been the opposite. There could have been stories where they were both doing the same thing and there were some negative stories about Kate and positive stories about Meghan. I don't know. But if the thesis is correct that when the tabloids or the news or people were talking, they tended to be biased against Meghan and biased for Kate, then yeah, that's not going to feel so great for Meghan, right? And we have to wonder why. I don't know enough about British culture or British royalty culture or the tabloid culture, but I'm guessing people are hypothesizing racism or anger at her for being an American and diluting the royal blood. I don't know if people are thinking that. Or the fact that she is a working woman, meaning, she has a job, she has a career. I don't know about Kate. Does she have Princess Di, she had a career, right? So I don't know. Who knows what the prejudice was or the reason for the bias. Maybe they'll get into it.
Advocated for so long for women to use their voice. And then I was silent.
Were you silent or were you silenced?
The latter.
So most of what I understand about the royal family is from watching The Crown on Netflix. I have no idea if that's an accurate depiction. I also wondered, aren't these just glorified rich people? I don't understand. But then I watched The Crown and I had a much deeper appreciation for the role that the royal family has played, particularly in history. I mean, on one hand, you could look at them as just glorified rich people or glorified celebrities. On the other hand, you could look at them as people that serve the people, that they have a role to play in leadership, in advocacy. One of the interesting things about watching the show for me is this tension between we need to be with the people, but we also have to be separate from the people. If we are truly with the people, then there's no difference between us and the people. And then people don't have a reason to listen to us. They don't have a reason to look up to us, or what. I don't know exactly how they would put it. And so there's a tension there of, it would be lovely to be with the people, it'd be relaxing, but in order to serve the purpose that we serve in the society, we have to be separate. And to preserve that separateness, then that actually gives us the ability to fulfill our duty, which is to provide an example and to give stability to a society when they need it, to advocate for certain people against Margaret Thatcher, or whatever the time in history is. And when I watched the show, I was like, oh, I guess I understand why certain societies have royalty that don't serve a political purpose precisely. And I'm sure people from the UK are yelling at me right now going, no, you don't understand. I don't. I know that I don't understand. But I do know that at the very least, they're very interested in their image. One could say in a selfish, narcissistic way, in a way to uphold their privilege and their power. Or another way to look at it is that they're upholding their image because it's their duty to do so. And in order for them to do good in society, they have to uphold their image. Or it's a combination of both, right? When Meghan entered the royal family and she was silenced, as she puts it, which I don't doubt, I totally trust Meghan when she says that it was either an effort to narcissistically uphold the false image of the royals so that they can hold on to their power, or it was trying to uphold the image so that they can do their duty in their society. They can do their job as royals. And as an outsider who is used to being very outspoken and doesn't want to be silenced, particularly as a woman who knows what it's like to be silenced by society and by people, I can imagine that being very distressful. Like, wait, you're telling me I can't say what I want to say? That's not going to fly with me. And so I wonder if that was a major factor in their decision to leave the royal family. It sounds like it was.
It was only once we were married and everything started to really worsen that I came to understand that not only was I not being protected, but that they were willing to lie to protect other members of the family, but they weren't willing to tell the truth to protect me and my husband.
Right. So I'm guessing that she is saying that Kate and William were protected and that Harry and Meghan were thrown under the bus, and she didn't like that. Now, I will say that one way to look at this is it's essentially a job, right? You're being offered a lifestyle and a job, and if you like the job, then you take it. All of us do this when we take on a job. We get hired, we don't necessarily know what's going to happen, and then we start learning, oh, there's kind of pros and cons to this job. And on one hand, I get this, but on the other hand, I get that. And then at a certain point, maybe you say, this is the cons outweigh the pros. I'm out of here. Here's my resignation. And it sounds like that's what Meghan and Harry did. They said, you know what? We resign. I know that's not an exact analogy, but they didn't want the pros did not outweigh the cons for them, and so they left. William and Kate, maybe again, the way that they're being treated, they're willing to stick around. It was a lifestyle that they just didn't like. They didn't like the way they were being treated, and they decided to leave. And, no harm, no foul, right? People have a right to make that choice, and I don't know what the big deal is. Is it a big deal? Comment below. Is it a big deal? I don't understand. People can't leave that job?
Well, you can't do this because it'll look like that. You can't, can I go and have lunch with my friends? No, you're oversaturated, you're everywhere. It would be best for you to not go out to lunch with your friends. I go, well, I haven't left the house in months. I mean, there was a day that
Yeah, that would drive me nuts. That was my guess as to how micro they control you. And maybe for Kate and William, they're like, I don't like being controlled, but overall, I like the job. And for Meghan, she's like, but I want to see my friends, and the pros, the benefits I'm getting from this job do not outweigh the fact that you're now telling me I can't hang out with my friends today. I want to see my friends. I feel Meghan's pain to be micromanaged and told that you can't even see your friends. that you would be that controlled. That's pretty awful. Maybe for someone else, it's okay with them, but not for Meghan. Makes sense.
The members of the family, she came over and she said, why don't you just lay low for a little while? Because you are everywhere right now. And I said, I've left the house twice in 4 months. I'm everywhere, but I am nowhere.
Wow, that gives some context. I left the house twice in 4 months. I mean, that tells you something, right? And yeah, the tabloids are blowing up, even though she is playing the game. She's following all the directives. And again, maybe you know more about the situation than I do, but if that is true, yeah, that'd be hard to deal with, right? And she said 4 years, so that's 4 years of living that lifestyle. So I could see I wonder how Harry feels, when he joins. I wonder what he's going to say.
And from that standpoint, I continued to say to people, I know there's an obsession with how things look, but has anyone talked about how it feels? Because right now, I could not feel lonelier.
So that's interesting. And I was wondering if I was going to be able to talk about this. Actually, a long time ago, maybe after the first season of The Crown, 4 or 5 years ago, I did a whole episode on the royal family and attachment theory. And it's hard to find all details, but I looked back hundreds of years. And the royal family itself, my thesis, just based on the little bit that I understand, they have multiple generations of attachment injuries going back hundreds of years. When we're young, when we're 0 to 5, we need to have a lot of attunement. Well, what is attunement? Attunement is a caregiver, a consistent caregiver, noticing our emotional state and reacting accordingly to us. So you have to notice the child and you have to react to them. So the child falls down, they start to cry. You don't see them fall down, but you hear them start to cry and you notice them crying, and then you go over to them, you hold them, you say, are you okay? And let me take care of you, that kind of thing. Or a kid is getting bored and they're starting to sigh and they're like kind of throwing their toys in frustration. You notice that and you take care of the child. When there's a lot of attunement to a child's emotional state, then a child learns secure attachment. They learn that they can come to you as a safe, secure base, and then they can go off and venture off into the world, explore the world, even if it's just on the other side of the room or preschool or play with another friend. Something bad happens, they run to you. If you're a parent of a young child, you know what this process is like. Your kid is in this constant state of going away, coming back, going away, coming back. And when you rinse and repeat that over and over and over again, and you do it well, you develop secure attachment. You need to have a consistent caregiver. Now, it doesn't have to be your parent. It can be a grandparent. It could be a very consistent nanny, maybe, an older sibling. Typically, it's the parents. And with the royal family throughout history, because they didn't really understand this, and it was a part of their aristocratic culture, they would send their kids away. And they actually depict this in The Crown, the TV show, where there'll be these nannies or governesses, I don't know what they call them, but they're these people who take care of the kids so that the king and the queen don't have to bother with the ins and outs of parenting and actually taking care of the kids. Well, what happens with that is that as a child, you want love and attention from your parents, but you're getting very infrequent attention. There is a professional who is giving you maybe attunement, but maybe not actual attunement, because that person goes home at the end of the day, and you might even know that as a 3-year-old, like this person works for me and my family, that they're not really my mom. And those nannies could maybe come and go. Maybe there's nannies who work with you for a couple of years and then boom, they leave you, which is another attachment injury of just like, I was really attached to that person because they were the one person on this planet that seemed to know me and take care of me. And now they've moved on to another job and now I have this new person. Well, when you do that to a kid, they develop what we call insecure attachment. And there are different ways of coping with insecure attachment. And one of the ways that some people will cope with insecure attachment is to avoid relationships. The child at a young age, 2, 3 years old, learns, I cannot depend on other people. Other people don't really care. Other people don't care about my feelings. If I do express my feelings, no one really reacts to it. So I'm just going to I'm going to try to turn off my attachment needs. Their attachment needs are down there, but they try to avoid relationships. It's just like, it's just better to avoid. People like that can feel very cold. Then you get married, you have kids, and you parent in that way. And what's the best way to avoid relationships with your kids? You send them off to professionals to take care of them. And the cycle just goes round and round and round. So you have all these people, generation by generation, and there's a lot of people like this. There was a sizable percentage of the population who actually live like this, and the royals just possibly are just one of those family lines. But one of the things that can happen in a family like this is that if you enter a family like that, you will feel like no one cares about your feelings, especially if you were attuned to when you were young and you're used to people caring about your feelings. You're used to people being connected and being vulnerable with each other. And when you enter the family and you're looking around, you're just like, people are acting like they care, but I don't think anyone cares about me at all. And it's not because they're jerk faces, it's because that's the way they were raised, and they have multiple generations going back. The other thing that it does is there's this general message that's given out to everyone of, you need to shut up and you don't matter. That's what it feels like in a family like that. It feels very distant, even though they can be very polite. It can feel very cold and very distant. We call these disengaged families, where people basically just don't notice each other. They're not doing it on purpose. It's because early in life they learned they had to distance themselves from relationships to cope with the difficulties of not getting their needs met. Now, I'm making a lot of speculations here. I don't know if the royal family suffers from this, but there's some strong evidence that they do. I would have to ask them, and as I always say, I can never diagnose from afar. I don't want to. I'm not interested in it. But I wonder if that's what Meghan is talking about here. Let's rewind that.
And from that standpoint, I continued to say to people, I know there's an obsession with how things look, but has anyone talked about how it feels? Because right now, I could not feel lonelier.
Right. So she is saying, and I rewinded it, she's saying, no one seems to care about how I feel, and I feel very lonely. That's what it can feel like in a disengaged family, in a avoidant attachment style family. You can the primary feeling, even for the other individuals in the family, is loneliness. And if you've been given these messages of that's just the way things are, and do your duty and make sure you don't complain because the tabloids are watching, it even compounds the issue, because if you complain, now you're in the tabloids and there's all this trouble. And so it's just this isolation for everyone in the family. And that would be really hard to deal with. And that's what I think Princess Di was partially dealing with, and at least in the documentaries I've seen and the way she's depicted on The Crown. And I don't know if any is accurate. But at least that's the story, is that Princess Diana felt very lonely, and she kept trying to reach out to people emotionally. And according to the story, they kept acting like they were in her camp, but they weren't really in her camp. And Charles was suffering in the same way, but he grew up in that system. He was acclimated to it, and other people entering the family are not necessarily acclimated to that. Some of you might either be in a family like that, or you might have married into a family like that, and it felt very lonely and very cold, and you couldn't really figure out why. Well, that might be one of the reasons. All right, well, that does it for part 1, in which I react to this interview. Tune in next time when I continue reacting to the interview. And everyone out there, please take care of yourself, because you deserve it. You really, really do.